Hey everyone, this is Chase with InsurGrid coming to you live with another industry fireside chat. I'm joined this week by Werner Kruck, who is a 30-year veteran of the insurance industry and most recently the COO of Security First Insurance, which is an insurance carrier down in Florida. Werner, thank you for joining.
Well, thank you. Actually, I'm a little bit older than that. It's 45 years, not 30.
45 years. Wow. Well, let's start off with that. How did you get into space and tell us more about your experiences in the insurance industry?
Well, my first job in the insurance industry was actually when I was 18, right out of high school. I was hired by Foremost Insurance Company as a human spreadsheet. I took numbers off green bar and I put them on accounting paper, and then I added columns and rows, just like a spreadsheet. And,
wow.
After college, I ended up joining Foremost, and that's what started my career. So my career has been mostly involving homeowners type property dwelling, some auto, and spent 4 years at one point with AIG, 2 of them internationally in Manila for Southeast Asia. And then most recently, the last 20 years, I've been in Florida doing homeowners and specialty, cat homeowners in Florida, basically.
Yeah, and always, interested in seeing like the Florida, what has given the rise to all these different Florida homeowners carriers, and did it start out with just a couple carriers and then it's kind of spread, or how did that all come to be?
Well, if you go back pre-Hurricane Andrew, and Hurricane Andrew is what really changed everything in Florida, the big guys had large market share here. What Hurricane Andrew taught them is that was a big exposure. And there's a term called tail risk. In other words, you could have a hurricane up to a certain point. The tail is how high. And so they don't want to, the big companies don't want to jeopardize their surplus that they use to write on a national basis just to write Florida. It's a bad trade-off for them. Right. And so a large national company might have a risk appetite that says, we'll insure to the 1 in 1,000 year event, which would have a premium that would be higher than most people in Florida would want to pay. Mm-hmm. So they withdrew from the market, and smaller companies came in to take up the market, the Florida specialists, if you will. It's starting in the late 90s and then through the last 20 years. And the difference is that the Florida specialists reinsure themselves to the roughly 125 year return period. So they have a 1 or 2% larger potential of having an event that goes out the top. So what happens to the tail risk? The tail risk is really on the backs of the citizens of Florida. If there's a big event and the Florida specialists can't handle it, the Florida Guarantee, the Guarantee Association and the Cat Fund and citizens all line up in different ways to handle the risk. So that's why there's all these small companies in Florida.
Interesting. And so talking more about your roles, what type of different roles in your career have you been exposed to in the industry?
I think most of my work has centered around two aspects. One is I started in product development. So forms, underwriting, and heavily pricing. And our industry is heavily data driven. And so I've been involved with a lot of data. And on the other side, early in my career, I realized that getting competitive advantage and making progress in our industry was going to be heavily centered around technology. And so I've studied technology, I understand it. I've made it a point to figure out what new technologies are coming, figuring out how they are going to be applied, can be applied to our business, and to factor that into the strategy. So my last position as Chief Operating Officer, naturally strategy and the fusion of technology, product, and all the aspects of delivering the product and servicing it through claims was under my direction and responsibility.
And you developed an app. Was it an app that you developed at Security First, like a hurricane detection app? What was the different technology you were building at Security First?
We got into the mobile technology fairly early. In fact, our first app was when we looked in the App Store. There only under insurance there were only 5 apps, and they were 4 big companies and little old us. And that was really designed to put more information in the hands of our customers. And we had a development company at the time, and they were ex-IBMers, and they came up with the idea of being able to track the hurricane as it was coming, and to be able to look at where you were and where the track was, and be able to then if you wanted to, pin it on Facebook. So if you have relatives up north, you could say, well, here's the hurricane track, and here's where I am, and it's either good or bad or something else, and link to information that they could use in a timely fashion. During Irma, I think we had over 500,000 uses of it, so it was pretty successful, and it won the national award for IBM for mobile technology.
Okay, wow, interesting. And so, I'm curious. You've been in technology for a long time. One of the 4. So you were one, and there was 4 other mobile apps in the insurance space.
Yeah, it was about it was maybe 2008, 2007.
Yeah, right when the iPhone came out. Very cool.
It was very basic.
Yeah, I bet. Well, fast forward now, the past, 10 years, past decade, what different technology have you seen, being developed that's been really interesting? And then today, the different technology that we'll get into InsurGrid momentarily, but the different technology that you've been a part of, you've seen that's come to the industry over the past decade.
Well, I think the most significant technology over the past decade really has been just the development and standardization of APIs. The ability to have different programs and different communications, and it's been fascinating. I mean, it was over 20 years ago. We had things like SOAP and all that, and they thought that APIs were going to be able to detect each other and figure out electronically how to pass data, and some of that stuff didn't work. But over time, this technology has allowed us to really integrate multiple systems, move data across companies and within companies at a remarkable pace, so that now systems can be developed. Instead of having to program all the systems, you can just connect other ones that already exist. And related to that, of course, is the cloud technology, which allows a lot of software as a service. Those two things have had a huge impact and continue to in our business and most other businesses as well.
Yeah. And so, a lot of the technology that you're talking about is more at the carrier level. What does this make for insurance agents? How are insurance agents, how are they going to survive in this climate? And what do you see as the future for the agent distribution model?
Well, first of all, the agent distribution model has proved remarkably resilient. I remember going to a conference in probably 1999, when the internet was just really starting to get some legs, and everybody thought the agent was going to disappear because, in fact, there was a panel discussion. 5 people on the panel all talked about the agent disappearing because there was no need for the agent. They could go direct to the company. So I raised my hand and said, it's been my experience in this industry that companies don't really know how to deal with a customer, and that agents really are frequently in the role of trying to not explain, but work with some irrational rule that a company has, and not expose the consumer to what the company has decided or why they've decided something. So and nobody in the panel would comment on it. But dealing with customers is a different ability, and most insurance companies, they're getting better. But unless you're living and dying on a direct model, you may not be good at. You may need agents.
Right. You're saying that carriers, they're really good at underwriting risk and building insurance products, but having customer support and dealing and supporting that is where they tend to fall short, and it's the strength of an agent.
Well, and two, when you're dealing with a company, when a company's dealing with a customer, it's somebody the customer doesn't know. There's no relationship there. You
Right.
get whoever you get in the call center,
Yeah.
and so the quality of your it's hard to manage the quality of your interaction.
Yeah.
Whereas an agent who owns his own business and is talking to his customers is typically going to have more. They're talking to the same person. There's building a relationship, and they have a stake in the outcome. And I think the other thing that has helped the independent agents survive two things. One is that's where you go for choice, because when you go to a captive agent or direct, you're not necessarily getting multiple choices. And that's also people will change their habits if for one of two reasons. Either they have to because that's the only way they can go, or because they can save money. And other than Geico's claim that you can save money 15% or more, nobody, I think, has really demonstrated to the insured community that going direct saves you money.
Right.
So, and it almost doesn't, because I think it's really difficult for a direct company. They have to do the same thing an agent does.
Right.
They have to have the interaction, and they haven't demonstrated that they can do it significantly cheaper so that it affects their bottom line price. So if you're not going to get a better price, why wouldn't you have choice and an advocate that you know that's down the street, just to make sure if something's confusing, you have somebody you can trust to go to and say, hey, what's going on?
Yeah. And what do you think of these new insurtechs coming to the space, like the Roots, the Lemonades, the Hippos that just IPO'd for $5 billion via SPAC? What do you think about all of those companies?
Well, there's two things. One, they're moving faster to take advantage of new data sources that are available and to integrate them into their process. So you could look at Hippo and Kin, for example, and they're instantly giving you a quote because they're pulling all the information from multiple sources, and they're pretty sophisticated about that. Yeah. A lot of the bigger carriers are still working because they have big systems, a lot of in-force business, and their integration is proceeding, but not that fast. Yeah. But the problem that Kin and Hippo and Lemonade run into is they don't have distribution.
Yeah.
And distribution is where it all starts. It doesn't matter how good your process is. You need someone to know you're there and get a quote from you. In fact, I think Hippo has done some business with agents. Yep. And so they have to not only build brand, but they have to get a sizable portion of the consumers to change their habits and say, I'm comfortable buying direct or buying, via online. And there's still a lot of evidence that people love to get a quote online because they want to get information without being bothered by a salesperson. But there's still a lot of evidence too that once they decide that they're going to go with a company and they have a quote, they'd like to talk to someone to make sure that they do in fact understand what they're buying and that it's the correct purchase.
Yeah.
So I think I would contrast Hippo and Kin actually with a company called TipTap, which is a company out of Florida that's just in the process of going national. The founder of that company, Paresh Patel, is a very bright guy, and what he's doing is he's taking the technology. This is my take on it. He's taking all the technology that Kin, Hippo, Swift, and Lemonade are using, and he's saying, what happens if I take all that technology and I actually put that in the hands of an independent agent, so that the agent can quickly get the quote, get the business issued, that the agent can be much more effective. Wouldn't that be a better way to do it? Wouldn't that be a better application of the technology rather than to have to go out and change people's habits from a distribution standpoint?
Yeah, and I guess that leads us to company InsurGrid. You're an investor in InsurGrid, and I'm curious. Meeting us. This was back in August when we were a much smaller company. What intrigued you about what we're doing, and what do you see? Where do you see our technology fitting in this new modern insurance tech stack?
Well, I think you've identified properly one of the awkward parts of the initial sales process with the agent is getting the information. Obviously, it is important if an insured is moving from one company to a new agency, it is important to know what they had before. You don't want to find out after a claim that they had some kind of coverage that they relied on and that wasn't offered to them during the transaction, or it's something they needed. So getting that process of getting the information, uh, your approach is pretty simple. And people, I'm an insurance professional. If you ask me for my deck page, I can find it, but it's going to take a little while. It's a lot easier to say, oh yeah, here's my login and password, and boom, put it in, and I'm done. And you got it. I think it's a fairly simple idea. There's technology obviously behind it to execute, and I think it jumpstarts the process of customer onboarding, and that gets into all the other things that agencies are doing to automate the process as well.
Yeah, and what do you see as the future for agents? Do you think that they're still going to be relevant for the next decade, and that companies like InsurGrid and TipTap are just going to bring technology to them, or do you think it's going to be a winner take all with the direct carriers, direct writers?
No, I don't think the direct writers are actually. Um, Allstate's bought some is investing in the independent agency system,
Mm-hmm.
and even your direct writers now all have agencies where they're writing business for competitors or other people because they can't underwrite enough products so that they can take care on their own, so they can take care of the average consumer.
Yeah.
So there's a real morphing there. I think that there is a lot of the independent agents have suffered between inefficiencies, mostly because I think there hasn't been enough work between the companies and the agencies to standardize enough of the processes, data, things like that. For years, the agents have been trying to figure out how to get companies the transformation station and all sorts of things like that to say, hey, if I have all the information in my agency system, can I use that to hit a button and get a quote from all the companies? So there are things that companies and agencies can do together, and the industry could do to make the independent agents much more efficient. And I think
Right.
you'll see some of that. Where you may start to see some of that is we now have several large groups like Brown and Brown, Assured. I think one of them, Acrisure. There's more than a few. BB&T, which is now Truist. At this point, most of these guys have just bought agencies. To a certain extent, Assured I think, is looking at can we rationalize the back room? But at some point, these guys might start to say, look, we've got a bunch of agents. They have a bunch of different systems. We're collectively spending a lot of time doing the same things and not very well. What if we built a solid platform for our products, for our agency management system, and standardized it? And then if a company like those size goes to the insurance industry and says, okay, you're a big company, but we're a big agent, and we're going to give preference to the products that fit our system and the services that work with us,
Yeah.
I think it could be a game changer.
Yep. Yes, having that like out of the box technology for these large agencies.
Well, you have various standardized softwares as a service. You connect everybody with APIs,
Yep.
and you
Off
can
the
do
rails.
it. Yep. And I
Awesome.
think your piece has got to be solved within that. And so you're addressing um, pretty well something that nobody's really addressed effectively. So I think that's the attraction.
Yeah. Well, we're grateful for you to be on board, and thank you so much for joining this week's Fireside Chat. And Yeah, I really appreciate all the support and great insights about the history and of the, hurricanes in Florida and how these products came to be. So I learned a lot. So I bet our audience will learn too. So thanks again, Werner, and thanks everyone for who's watching this.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. Thank you.